we will just have a few opening remarks first. So firstly, I would like to call on Mr. Pat Ryan. So Pat will give us a quick introduction to the Tales from the Region series. So over to you, Pat.
Thank you, Aisling, and thank you for everybody attending tonight. I suppose the background to the Tales from the Regions is last year, as everyone knows, we went fully online for all of our events due to COVID-19, and that gave us fantastic opportunity to start engaging with people outside of Tokyo in the regions around Japan. And I suppose the reason for this is we know we have a lot of Irish people and connections with Ireland in the regions, and we wanted those people to feel more connected to the IJCC. And also we wanted to hear about their stories and the stories of the regions that they were living and working in and made their home. So we started our first event on September 2nd with Aisling up in Kamaishi, and then we went from there to Fukuroi and Shizuoka, Nara, Matsue, and delighted to have Wakayama represented tonight here. So I think that first event then led us to form a regional committee, which is quite active now with 10 members. And the future plans really are to start building deeper business and cultural relationships with the different cities and towns around Japan. We've so far, I think today will be the fifth region. We have a lot further to go. So if there's anybody on the call tonight or watching the recording, please reach out to the IJCC through Emiko or myself if you're interested in showcasing the region you're living in. So I'll hand back to Aisling and look forward to hearing all about Wakayama tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pat. So next up, I'd like to invite Ms. Chitose Kametani-san, who is the Section Chief of the Tanabe Board of Education Lifelong Learning Division, where Paul works. So Kametani-san, would you like to say a few words? お願いします。
はい。在日アイルランド商工会議所の皆さん、はじめまして。私は田辺市教育委員会障害学習課長の亀谷千歳と申します。本日は皆様方に和歌山県田辺市をご紹介できる機会をいただき感謝申し上げます。
Esteemed members and friends of the Ireland-Japan Chamber of Commerce, my name is Chitose Kametani, and I am the Section Manager of the Tanabe City Board of Education Lifelong Learning Division. Firstly, I would like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to introduce Tanabe City in Wakayama Prefecture.
田辺市は和歌山県の南部に位置する人口は約7万人。面積は調べてみましたら、アイルランドのロングフォード州とほぼ同じ広さの1027平方キロメートルで、この地域では最も広い地方自治体です。
Tanabe City is located in the south of Wakayama Prefecture, with a population of about 70,000. We cover an area of 1,022 kilometers squared, which, when I looked it up, is almost the same size as County Longford in Ireland. Tanabe City is the largest municipality in this region.
田辺市は世界遺産紀伊山地の霊場と参詣道の熊野古道をはじめ、海山の大自然、温泉など観光資源が豊富で、古代から中世にかけては貴族から庶民に至る大勢の人々が日本中から聖地熊野へ巡礼に訪れた歴史ある町です。最近はこの熊野古道を訪れる外国人観光客が急激に増加しており、外国人観光客の受け入れ体制が整い、ますます人気が高まっている地域です。と言いましても、昨年からの新型コロナウイルスによって、今は残念ながら外国人観光客の姿が見られなくなっていますが、コロナが落ち着いたら、また質の高いおもてなしができるようにと準備が続けられています。
Tanabe City is abundant in tourist attractions, including onsen hot springs, vast ocean and mountain scenery, and the Kumano Kodo, the UNESCO World Heritage, sacred sites and pilgrimage routes in the key mountain range. Tanabe has a history from ancient times up until the Middle Ages of large crowds of nobility and commoners from all over Japan visiting to conduct the Kumano pilgrimage. This region is growing in popularity, and up until recently, saw a rapid increase in the number of visiting overseas tourists, alongside new systems being implemented to facilitate them. As of last year, due to the spread of COVID-19, overseas tourists are now a rare sight in Tanabe. However, we continue to prepare for the aftermath of the virus, when we will once again be able to provide high-quality hospitality.
産業としましては、梅、みかんなどの果樹農業が盛んで、特に梅は日本一の収穫量を誇っており、梅加工業を中心とした食品加工業も盛んです。梅干しはご存知でしょうか？食べたことのある方は顔をしかめるかもしれませんが、最近は梅干しを使ったさまざまな食べやすいレシピも開発されており、外国に向けた営業も行われているようです。梅酒も有名です。香り高く飲みやすい梅酒は健康にも大変良くて、外国の方にも人気です。ぜひ一度召し上がっていただきたいと思います。
In terms of industry, fruit farming is widespread in Tanabe, including the cultivation of ume, Japanese apricots, and mikan oranges. In relation to ume in particular, we boast the highest yield in Japan, and the food processing industry centered around ume is also very active here. Have you ever tried the pickled and dried variety of ume, known as umeboshi? Those who have may have been surprised by the sour taste, but recently we've seen the development of many new umeboshi recipes, and it seems that sales are also being carried out overseas. One must not forget to mention umeshu. This fragrant and easy to drink ume liqueur is very good for health and gaining popularity internationally. If you ever have the opportunity, please give it a try.
さて、そうした中で、田辺市国際交流員として活躍してくれているポールですが、普段は田辺市国際交流センターで外国人の相談対応や市民の国際交流活動の支援、国際理解推進事業を企画・実施するなど、田辺市の国際交流の推進に取り組んでいます。アイルランドについての講座や料理の紹介、アイルランドの遊びを子どもたちに紹介したり、アイリッシュダンスの講座などもとても人気で、アイルランドに馴染みのなかった子どもも大人もポールを通じてアイルランドに親しみを感じ、興味を持つとともに広い世界に目を向けるきっかけになっていると思います。
And so it is within this context at the Tanabe City International Exchange Center that Paul, who is the current coordinator for international relations in Tanabe City, plans and carries out his duties, which include international resident consultation, support for international exchange initiatives, and activities to promote international understanding. Paul's guest lectures about Ireland, introductions to Irish cuisine, Irish playground game introductions to local children, and Irish dance lessons have been very popular. I think that thanks to Paul, both children and adults who were not familiar with Ireland gained newfound interest and have not only felt a closer connection to your country, but also have been encouraged to look outward to the wider world.
ポールは週に1回は田辺市観光センターにも勤務しており、熊野を訪れる外国人の立場に立って観光案内業務の充実や改善に日本人スタッフと一緒に取り組んでくれています。皆様方もぜひ田辺市を訪れていただいて、ポールの案内で歴史ある巡礼の道、熊野古道を体験していただきたいと思います。この後、ポールから詳しく田辺市を説明いたしますので、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
Paul also works with Japanese staff at the Tanabe City Tourist Information Center once a week to enhance and improve tourist information services from the point of view of an overseas guest who will visit the Kumano region. In the future, If you have the chance, I recommend you all to come to Tanabe and experience the historical pilgrimage routes of the Kumano Kodo with Paul as your guide. Thank you very much for your attention. I would now like to hand over to Paul, who will give you a more detailed explanation. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kametani-san. ありがとうございました。And thank you for taking the time to attend tonight's event. And Paul, well done on your interpreting. It's hard to talk about yourself in the third person, so you did a great job keeping a straight face. I see also there's some connections with Ireland already appearing, with Longford and Tanabe being similar in size. So that's great to see. So without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to yourself, Paul, for your update on Wakayama. And we're looking forward to your presentation.
Sure, excellent. I'm sorry, first of all, for anyone there that might have been surprised, that may have thought that there was no interpretation going to be offered for Kametani Kacho's speech there. Without further ado, as introduced, my name is Paul Finn. I'm a coordinator for international relations here in Tanabe City. And I'm going to speak to you about Tanabe City and Wakayama. I suppose first, a bit of a disclaimer is to say that I'm not an expert on Wakayama prefecture in its entirety. I know a lot more about Tanabe City, but I'll try my best to give you a taste of what's on offer in the prefecture, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions at the end. So first of all, I'll start with a self-introduction. So I suppose my first meeting with Japan was when I started to study in the University of Limerick. Applied languages was my course, and I took Japanese as an elective as part of that. My first time visiting Japan was in 2015, and it was actually at the behest of the Toyokoin Limited, who are, as you might know, premium contributors to the Ireland-Japan Chamber of Commerce. So I was based in the Asakusa area near Sensoji, and I was working in one of the hotel branches there. And I also got the opportunity to spend 1 week in the Toyokoin branch in Matsue City. So I got to experience that kind of Irish connection with Koizumi Yakumo, and also a lot of the other Irish events and things that are going on down there. So that was fantastic. And the picture here you might see on the right is also when I took part in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in 2015 in Tokyo. So that was a really fantastic experience for me. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated in 2017 from the University of Limerick with a BA in Applied Languages. I studied Gaeilge, Irish language, French, and Japanese. I also, after I graduated, for a short time, worked in a company known as National Pen. So they're based in my hometown in Dundalk, but they also hire a lot of Japanese staff in Ireland. So some people may have heard of them before. I was based on the customer service and upselling team, and I worked between Australia, New Zealand, and also the Japan market. After National Pen, I worked for almost 2 years in Conradh na Gaeilge. For anyone that has never heard of Conradh na Gaeilge, the aim of Conradh na Gaeilge is to promote the Irish language. So I visited different schools, kind of similar to what I'd be doing in my role now as a coordinator for international relations. One of the highlights for me was helping with the launch of a book called Sayonara, which was a collection of Koizumi Yakumo Lafcadio Hearn's short stories, a bilingual edition in English and Irish. So that was very fun. We went down to the Experience Japan event in Dublin, and we helped with the launch of that. So that was a great experience for me too. At the moment, I'm working as the Tanabe City Coordinator for International Relations. I'll go into a little bit more detail about what that role entails. As Kametani Kacho mentioned earlier, I'll actually be finishing up at the end of next month. So my next plan going forward, I'm enrolling in a PME in NUI Galway. And I'll also be teaching Leaving Cert Japanese with the Post-Primary Languages Initiative. If anyone has heard of those before, they're one of the biggest organizations that teaches Japanese back in Ireland. So that's my plans going forward. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea of my work-related duties, I've put them into this kind of pyramid. So at the bottom are the things that I do most, and then at the top, as it goes up more, are duties that I suppose I do less and less. So my main duties here would be translation. And as we mentioned in the introduction, Tanabe is kind of an area that's growing in popularity for overseas tourists. So there's a lot of translation to be done to kind of facilitate that tourism. So a lot of things related to the famous parts of Tanabe, the food. We also have a lot of support that we give to foreign residents here in the International Exchange Centre. So I do a lot of translation related to that. My next one would be, I put guest appearances. I hope that's not too self-perpetuating. I visit schools mostly, and then I also do kind of lectures for social groups here within Tanabe at their request. So that's an area that I really enjoy of my work. Also event planning. So we often have events, especially seasonal events, so related to Halloween and Christmas. This was, of course, before Corona. We had a lot more of these, but now they've kind of been cut down. So we've had to be a bit more, have a bit more intuition and kind of think more about how we can organize events that are safe for children to attend. So that's been a kind of difficulty that I think has been across the board for CIRs all over Japan. My next most large duty, I suppose, is tourism promotion. So as we mentioned in the introduction, I do 1 day a week in the Tourist Information Office here in Tanabe. So most of what we promote in that office is kind of guiding visitors that want to hike the Kumano Kodo or hike the different routes along the pilgrimage. We also talk about the delicious food and fantastic scenery that's on offer here in Tanabe and in the surrounding areas. So we kind of are a first stop, I suppose, for people that arrive in Tanabe. Our information center there, as you see in the picture, that's actually located right in the station. So it's very accessible as well to anyone coming to visit. The fifth part of my work duties would be supporting different JET program participants in the area as a prefectural advisor, but also supporting foreign residents that live here in Tanabe. So for example, we offer a Japanese class here in the Tanabe International Exchange Center, where international residents can come free of charge and avail of Japanese classes from volunteer teachers. Then I also write, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but I write an article every month for a newsletter that's distributed to everyone in Tanabe. The name of the newsletter is Poru no Tanabe Anaba Meguri. So looking at holes in the wall, kind of interesting spots around the Tanabe region. Okay, also I do a little bit of English teaching, sometimes for staff and civil servants here in Tanabe. I also do interpretation. Unfortunately, this is a lot less than I'd like it to be. My main interpretation experience was when I first arrived. I did interpreting for the women's Cameroon women's volleyball team, who arrived for a pre-World Cup training camp. So that was back in 2019. So that was very enjoyable as well. We also cooperate with different groups, as I mentioned. So one of the main groups here would be TIES, which stands for Tanabe International Exchange Society. They're a group of volunteers that get together and try to promote international understanding. I also work with a group known as Seeker, who are based in Tanabe High School here in the city. And finally, just to kind of catch all, various other international exchange activities. So in terms of promoting Ireland, I suppose, as I mentioned, those guest appearances would be a big one. So this is the flyer that we handed out to different social groups and schools. And some of the main, it's kind of like a takeaway. So it's like a menu, and they look at the different events and different speeches that I offer, and then they pick it and order from us. So for example, as we mentioned earlier, the children's playground games, also cooking classes, introduction to St. Patrick's Day, introduction to Irish language, so those kind of things. One of our main events that we held last year was that we got a couple from Osaka that were very Japanese couple that had been to Ireland many times and were very good at traditional Irish music. As a set, they were known as Puka, and they gave us a performance of traditional Irish music. And they also, between the songs that they played, explained the instruments and the background, which was very interesting. And on that day, I myself gave a kind of cultural introduction to Ireland as well. So that was a very fun event. Then, as I mentioned, that article that I write every month for Koho Tanabe, so our local newsletter. So I try to always put a link at the start to Ireland. So for example, in the article on the left, I visited a local ume apricot farm. And I tried to link that then back to the kind of, because ume is a kind of sign of spring starting here in Japan, I linked that back to kind of the signs that we have in Ireland of the start of spring. So for example, the daffodils or St. Patrick's Day, that kind of thing. And on the right here, I talked a little bit about mushroom growth in Ireland, that Ireland is very popular for mushrooms. And this area in Tanabe is also known for a mushroom researcher called Minakata Kumagusu. So always trying to like look for those links between Tanabe and Ireland and to kind of bring them to light. Next, I'd like to introduce a little bit more about Wakayama Ken in general. And I have this short video that I'd like you to watch. It's about 1 minute long, and it's from a song called Wakayama Love Song. So of course, this is one of our favorite songs here in Wakayama. Just to give you an idea of some of the lyrics there. And I think a lot of the kind of sensibility of Irish people is also reflected in this too. So they talk about always being in the shadow of Osaka and sometimes mixed up with Okayama. I think any Irish people that have experienced being mixed up with Iceland will know that feeling. Also about the shy people of Wakayama going to Tokyo and they lie and say they're from Osaka. And Wakayama being the West Coast and it's the California of Japan. So all of these lyrics that I think really encapsulate this fantastic Wakayama pride that I felt a lot here. The ace of the kinky regions as well. So for anyone that has never been to Wakayama Prefecture, and I hope there aren't many of those people in the audience, it's located right here underneath Osaka on the Kii Peninsula. It has an area of 4,725 kilometers squared, so it's similar to County Kerry in Ireland. And the population is around twice County Cork. Sorry for anyone if I'm mentioning Cork and Kerry in the same breath there. I might anger some of the participants, I hope not. The largest cities in Wakayama Prefecture are Wakayama City, Tanabe is the second largest, and Hashimoto. Also in terms of access, we have a lot of highway buses. We also have the high-speed Kuroshio line that runs along the coast of the Kii Peninsula. And we also have an airport near to us here in Tanabe in Nanki Shirahama that does direct flights to Tokyo 3 times a day usually, but now it's been reduced a little bit because of Corona. So I think one other characteristic of Wakayama Prefecture is that it's really trying quite hard to internationalize. So we can see this from kind of the number of coordinators for international relations that they've hired as well. So it went from just 2 in 2016 to 7 now in 2021. In terms of famous exports, we have ume apricots or plums. We also have mikan oranges and binchotan charcoal. For anyone who's a fan of yakitori, you might be familiar with binchotan charcoal. It's also known as white charcoal. So it's charcoal that's prepared at a really, really high temperature. And because of that, the UV rays that it gives off are fantastic for cooking meat like chicken or beef. The #1 ranking in terms of Wakayama are for motorbike owners and unfortunately also motorbike related traffic accidents. So Wakayama has a lot of mountain roads, so a lot of people prefer to go around by motorbike. But it has fantastic views as well, especially here in Tanabe City. The Ryujin skyline is a fantastic area if any of the participants are interested in motorbiking. So just to give you a little bit more of an idea of our famous tourist locations. So the first one here is Shirahama. This is famous as being the second place in Japan to have a live panda in the zoo after Ueno Zoo in Tokyo. So Shirahama Adventure World also has a panda. It also has a beautiful white sandy beach. So it's quite a popular tourist resort area. Then the second one, you might have seen this picture on different Japan promotional materials. So this is Nachi Falls, the highest single drop waterfall in Japan. And this is also a pagoda in front of it. That's a part of the Nachi Shrine complex. Also, we already mentioned the Kumano Kodo. So the Kumano Kodo is probably one of our biggest tourist attractions here, not only in Tanabe, but also in Wakayama Prefecture. Part of the Kumano Kodo is also here at Hongu, the area where the central Grand Shrine is located. You'll find the biggest torii gate in all of Japan. If anyone has heard of Koya, Koya is also a famous area for Buddhism and for spirituality. It's a spiritual center in all of Japan. So Koya-san, Mount Koya, is also located here in Wakayama. This is from a video that went viral a couple of years ago. Wakayama is home to the only station in probably the world that station master is a cat. So Nitama. So this is popular, especially with children, and a lot of foreigners might have heard of the cat station master in Japan. Finally, just to mention, Yuasa is also a city that's famous for soy sauce production and is known as the birthplace of soy sauce in Japan. So just a couple of areas of, I suppose, note there in Wakayama. Next, just talk about Tanabe City. So the characters that make up Tanabe City mean rice paddy and region. So it's quite an agricultural rural region. It's also the second most populated city in Wakayama. And it's the largest area of a city in all of Kansai, or the Kinki region, I should say. In terms of tourist attractions, we talked earlier about Tanabe being the mouth of the Kumano Kodo. So a lot of tourists that want to start their pilgrimage on the Kumano Kodo will start from Tanabe City. Also, Ryujin Onsen is one of the 3 beautifying hot springs of Japan. So it's said that people that bathe in Ryujin Onsen become more beautiful. Also, we're famous for 3 amazing citizens, and I'm wondering if any of the participants tonight can guess who these are. Maybe I won't have time to let you. I might just fly through it, but to give you a clue anyway, the first one is famous for slime molds, the second one for modern martial arts, and the third one for being a warrior monk. I won't put you under pressure, I'll just give you the answers. So the first one is Minakata Kumagusu, I mentioned him earlier. The second is Ueshiba Morihei, who actually invented the martial art of Aikido. If anyone in the audience practices Aikido. The inventor of Aikido is also from Tanabe. And the final one is Benkei, who is famous from the Tale of Genji. He's a warrior monk. Okay, so finally, I'd like to talk a little bit more about notable industries in this region. And I'm going to focus on 3: agriculture, tourism, and finally textiles. So in terms of textiles, it's mostly strong in the north of Wakayama Prefecture. So I wouldn't be an expert on it, but I'm going to just give you a taste of what kind of thing goes on. Also, from that textile industry, there's also a link to production of chemicals and also production of heavy machinery. So I'll just talk a little bit about that. So first of all, in terms of agriculture, we've already mentioned the kind of importance of ume and mikan here in Tanabe. Wakayama as a whole is known sometimes as the kingdom of fruit. So it's the biggest fruit producer in all of Japan. Also, we mentioned umeshu. If you're ever drinking umeshu, the chances are that the ume that is in that umeshu comes from Wakayama. The reason being that more than 60% of all of Japan's umeshu is made with Wakayama ume. So that's a fun fact for you there. There's also recently been quite a big boom in game meat consumption, or GBA. This is related to the agricultural industry because with the depopulation of these rural regions, there's a lot more deer and monkeys and, well, not monkeys, we don't eat those, but deer and wild boar kind of coming into these villages that were once very heavily populated. And as a way to kind of control that and to protect the fruit production, there's been more encouraging of eating game meats. So quite an interesting link there. Also, I just put in here cedar forestry. This was an industry that was very large, kind of in the post-war period in Wakayama. It was very, very busy industry. but it's not so strong anymore. There's more of a focus towards kind of fruit production and other areas. And finally, in terms of ume, we also have to mention that the UNESCO, that ume production in Minabe and Tanabe is recognized by UNESCO as a globally important agricultural heritage system. So it has worldwide recognition as something that should be sustained. And it's actually very fascinating the way that they produce ume in this region. So it's linked again to this purity of water that comes from high up in the mountains, where they have these special oak trees called ubamegashi. And these oak trees kind of help to purify the water. But not only that, the same oak trees are also used to produce the charcoal that I mentioned earlier, the white charcoal, the binchotan. And that water kind of filters down and leads to these delicious fruit that are produced. And also there are lots of other fruits produced at the same time in the region. So it's a very kind of, I suppose, bio-aware method of production. Very, very fascinating how much it's considered. Okay, so moving on to talk about tourism. I've already mentioned several times the UNESCO World Heritage Pilgrimage Site of the Kumano-Kodo. That was granted recognition by UNESCO in 2004. There's also a link here. There are only two pilgrimage sites in the world that are recognized by UNESCO, and those are the Kumano-Kodo and also the Camino de Santiago in Spain. So there is a system in place here where pilgrims can get recognition for walking both pilgrimages. So the Camino de Santiago also being very popular for Irish tourists. If Irish tourists are to come over here and also walk the Kumano-Kodo, they're able to avail of this system and get themselves a certificate and a pin badge. Finally, we also mentioned the explosive increase. Just to give you an idea of how explosive that actually was, in 2011, the number of foreign guests visiting this region was at 1,217, and that jumped in 2018 to 43,824. So a huge, huge increase. I really can't emphasize enough how massive that was. And a lot of it was thanks to local people in this area cooperating, working together, improving the infrastructure, also the worldwide recognition by UNESCO, and the DMO model, which was kind of started and really enforced here in this area. So also, when I talk about tourism, I think one of the things that struck me the most personally was how innovative some of that this area is in terms of thinking of tourism. So they're really encouraging woofers. For anyone that's not heard of woofers, that's worldwide organic opportunities in organic farming. So it's where they get kind of young people to come in and to work on the farms, and they give them kind of house and board. And it's become very popular in this region. People kind of take career breaks and will often come to this area to do woofing. Also remote working hubs. So this is something that's been especially developed here in Tanabe, where internet connections have been improved and spaces have been constructed where people can come maybe from busier cities and come to this area to work remotely. And finally, this is more on a personal note, but hikikomori rehabilitation. So this is a project that a colleague of mine is actually working on, where people, hikikomori, are kind of depressed, out of work individuals. They come to these kind of more rural areas and do some work on farms, and it's thought that this will kind of help to rehabilitate them. And so far, he's had massive success in this project. Okay, so moving on to the textile industries and kind of a wider picture of Wakayama. First of all, I suppose I wanted to mention that in terms of traditional crafts, Wakayama is a very, very strong prefecture. So for example, in the northern area, construction of furniture, also the minachigasa, which is a famous waterproof kind of hood that's made out of reeds that people wind together, and many, many others. And from that, I suppose, the textile industry is kind of one of the main areas that popped up. So it started in the Edo period with Kishu flannel as a way of developing materials for military clothing. And then in post-World War II, these old knitting machines that remained in Wakayama were undamaged. So it gave Wakayama kind of a head start in that industry. And this area is also able to remain competitive because of this strong reputation that they have that goes back so many years, and also because companies are able to cooperate with each other. So one company, just as a kind of Irish connection to give you an idea, a colleague that I've also been working with in Crota Gaelach. So he's producing t-shirts with Irish branding, but his website and all of his social media are actually trilingual. So he produces them in English, Irish, and Japanese. And a quote from him: "If you're looking for quality textiles in Japan, my understanding is that you should look no further than Wakayama." So it is quite a widespread reputation. Also in terms of machinery metals, this, as far as I understand, has kind of come up from the textile production industry. So from textile printing, nap raising and bleaching on the Kishu flannel. And as the worldwide textile industry started to kind of shrink, these companies started to branch out more into electronics and IT. So computer controlled flat knitting machines, photo processing equipment, automatic sealing machinery, rice milling machines, inspection equipment. One that might be of interest here, the weft knit machines, have a possible connection to Irish Aran sweaters or Aran jumpers. So this is a quote from the Irish Times: "From humble beginnings making sweaters for tourists, it has developed into a successful and significant Irish business, producing collections of men's and women's wear twice a year on the state-of-the-art Japanese computer machinery, using high-quality imported Italian and South American yarns, such as pure cashmere, etc., etc." But just to show you that there is a link also to the Irish side there. Then in terms of chemicals, this kind of started during World War I with dyeing and trying to come up with more innovative ways and more effective ways of dyeing the fabrics. And then in present day, there's a focus on large variety, but small volume demand. So for dyes and pigments, macromolecular compounds, and an area that might be of interest to the Irish businesses there as well is the pharmaceutical intermediates. So they're also produced, some of them in Wakayama. Okay, so just to, I was maybe a bit too wary of the time there. I think I finished a little bit early, but maybe if there's any questions, I could go over some of the areas that I rushed through, or Emiko-san, maybe we could show some of the videos. But just to sum up the characteristics of industry in Wakayama, and this is from, again, a personal perspective, I suppose for me, it was kind of the understanding of the global context that I think that this area kind of adapts very quickly to, for example, the competitive textile industry. So they have a lot of competition in the big textile producers like China, India, Bangladesh. However, they've been able to focus on that, I suppose, customized area, and have still been able to thrive in that industry. Also specialization and targeting, and in particular, the Kumano Tourism Bureau, the DMO model, so that is a way that the tourists from overseas are kind of targeted and the experience is completely focused on them as customers. Also this underdog mentality, which I kind of see in Irish business as well, that Wakayama maybe thinks that it's in the shadow of Osaka, but there's still a pride in the Made in Wakayama brand, which I think is really, really special in this area. And then finally, the desire to penetrate other markets. So the increase in internationalization activities. So we mentioned kind of the increase in the number of CIRs, Coordinator of International Relations, and also some of the initiatives that we've been involved in here in Tanabe have also shown a real desire to internationalize and penetrate other markets. Okay, well, thank you very much for your attention, Gurmila Mahagov, and feel free to ask any questions. I might just skip back. There's a short video on the knitting industry in Wakayama, which I think would be interesting if you'd like to see it. It has English subtitles. Can everyone see that okay? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yep, we're good, Paul.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay. And just let me know if you don't get the sound either.
Okay, all good.
「世界で見たらこんだけ集積した、ところは少ないんじゃないかと思います。だからまあ自社でなくても、他の会社にあるとかですね、こうじゃなくてやっぱり全体で和歌山は丸編みの生地の産地やということでね、世界に向かってアピールしていくというか、たくさん会社があるということが一つの、強みじゃないかなというふうに思ってます。
和歌山の産地はいろんな機械があって、昔からあるヴィンテージの機械、ハイテクのマシンいろいろ揃ってるんですけど、やっぱりここでしか作れないものっていうのを作っていかないと特徴が出ないですし、特に開発に重きを置いてるのは見たことがない素材っていうのを、作ってお客さんを驚かせたいっていうところが開発の時に持ってるところなんですね。
常にやっぱりアンテナを張り巡らして、簡単に言ったらありそうでないものとか、そういったものを探しながら、新しいものを開発して世界とも競争していかないとダメなんで、特徴のあるものを作り続けていくっていうのはね、やっぱり重要じゃないかなというふうに思います。
和歌山で作る製品であったり洋服であったりっていうところをもっとね日本人にも知ってほしいのと同時に、海外の方々にも発信できるような企業になっていかなきゃいけないし、そのためには一社だけ頑張ってても仕方がないんですよね。一緒に賛同してくれて、その同じ船に乗ってくださる人たちを、集めながら業界問わずですね、ニット業界繊維産業だけじゃなくってまた違う異文化の人たちと一緒に協業しながらですね、一緒の船に乗ってメイドイン和歌山を外に発信していくっていうのを今後やっていきたいと思ってます。
And that's it for me. Sorry to finish a little bit early. I hope that's okay.
That's okay, Paul. Thanks a million. Thanks a million for your talk on Wakayama and Tanabe, and it was a really fantastic talk. Very interesting. I think everyone else will agree with me. You mentioned a few things that stood out. I think we all had a bit of a smile on our face watching the We Love Wakayama video, so thanks for sharing that. And the translation of the lyrics as well was interesting to hear. You also mentioned woofing is a popular activity in Wakayama, and I actually did woofing myself a few years ago, and I almost ended up in Wakayama, but I went to Hokkaido in the end. But if anyone is interested at all in going to Wakayama, I think woofing is a great way to do so, and it really gets you involved in the local community as you're living with a family there and you're helping out. So I recommend that as well. So I suppose we will open questions now and see if anyone attending tonight has any questions that they'd like to ask Paul. So it can be about any of the topics that Paul has mentioned, or if anything else comes to mind. So if anyone has any questions, just feel free to unmute yourself. You can let us know your name and your question. And of course, don't be shy. Because
I have one question. I'll start. If that's okay.
Go ahead there, Fash.
Paul, well done. Congratulations. It's always fantastic to hear about the region that you're in. I'm kind of very interested in the fact that you really seem to be focused on exporting or globalization or internationally minded. First of all, if you can answer, I suppose, where has that come from? And then the second question, I suppose, is practically what countries or cities have you twinned with as a town or prefecture, if you know? So, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I suppose the first thing from my personal perspective, I've worked a lot in that area of internationalization, so maybe I'm a little bit biased in terms of answering this question. But I think especially from my time working with the Tanabe Tourist Information Bureau, I've seen a lot of kind of an urge to encourage foreign tourists and to encourage kind of interest in this region. And it's paid off very well for them. Also in terms of exporting. So in the agriculture, I talked a little bit about ume. I have an acquaintance that works in an ume factory that are carrying out sales overseas. So I suppose those two areas I've especially seen push towards globalization. In terms of sister cities and that kind of twinning, I might just pass this over to Kametani Kacho in terms of Shimai Toshi とか、それは田辺には
今はない。
今はないですか？
以前はありましたけど。
あ、そうですか。
はい。
So in terms of those kind of connections to in twinning, Tanabe City itself doesn't have a connection at the moment, but has in the past. And there are a couple of other connections in Wakayama Prefecture as a whole, but I wouldn't be an expert on them. So I prefer not to go into detail about that, but they do exist.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think it's kind of very encouraging to see, you know, even a relatively small city in a small prefecture have this focus on internationalization. So if you need any help in the future with looking at twin cities or within Ireland as well, we'd be interested in facilitating that. On an aside as well, I also know of a company who does a lot around promoting workation sites, and you mentioned you do a lot of that. So I'll pass on something to you, Paul, later on that.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Does anyone else have any questions for Paul? I suppose while we wait, we do have a few questions that came through in the application form, so we can cover those while people get their questions ready. So one question that came up was, so for yourself, Paul, what suggestions do you have for the local businesses in rural Wakayama to maximize their resources and encourage locals, particularly the youth, to stay and help develop the community?
I saw this question coming in, and
Yeah.
I thought it was very, very difficult, but I'll try my best. I suppose from my work previously with Conor na Gaeilge, we kind of worked a lot in those Gaeltacht regions, and we talked a lot about Bánu na Gaeltachta, or the depopulation of these rural regions. And I suppose first of all, Wakayama, it's kind of a similar case where it's important to kind of recognize how valuable these areas are and how much of a gem they are in terms of tourism and in terms of agricultural industry, but also in terms of that kind of native culture as well. I mean, I don't think that people that visit Tokyo would get half the fantastic experience that they would if they visited somewhere like Wakayama. And also, I suppose, the question mentions especially young people. So I suppose, like growing up in Ireland at a time when we just hit the 2008, the crash, and it was hard to find jobs. We saw so many initiatives popping up, but I wonder how much people actually consult with the young people with that target area that they want to employ. So I suppose for businesses in Wakayama to, I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, and I'd love if anyone else, any of the participants tonight could chime in, but to maybe try to focus more and consult more with that demographic or with that group, and to kind of pinpoint their needs and to work as hard as you can to facilitate that. I hope that wasn't too much of a wishy-washy answer, but
thank you. That's okay, Phil. Thank you very much. If anyone else from the IGCC or anyone here tonight has any comments on that, I suppose as well, like local businesses, how they can, especially with encouraging locals to stay, because we see a lot of the locals heading off to or the young people heading to Tokyo, and the populations of the rural areas are depleting. So anyone
and
have
a problem that's exactly mirrored as well in Irish society, where people go to Dublin or else they go to England or Australia.
Yeah.
So definitely a very pertinent issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump in again, and sorry for hogging it, but there's I've seen a service which is around a lot of rural communities have older people whose businesses don't have successors. So I've seen some schemes for local communities where they find people in the cities who want to run local small food and kind of specialist businesses, and they match them with the older people who have no successors through the local cities, and it's starting to be successful in some other parts of Japan. So I think that's bringing people back to the regions is another way to try and facilitate that, I think. But I agree with you, getting the ideas from the younger people is also very helpful.
Thank you very much, Pat, for that input. We actually have another question that has just come through. So Paul, for yourself again, international travelers who visit Kumano Kodo, what are they expecting, or what is their purpose for visiting the Kumano Kodo? It's a very general question, it says.
Oh, a fantastic question. I suppose, like, when you talk about that big of a number, I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of tourists that come to visit, usually when we don't have Corona. But people come for lots of different reasons. But from talking to people kind of face to face in the Tourist Information Center, I suppose a lot of people have similar reasons to why people walk the Camino de Santiago. So as a kind of chance for reflection, and as a chance to get in touch with their spiritual side. It's similar to the Camino de Santiago, but also different in a lot of other ways. So whereas the route by the Camino might take over a month to hike the full route, the routes on the Kumano Kodo are a lot more manageable. So you can go from one side of the Kii Peninsula to the other side in 5 or 6 days. And they're also, it's actually a network of routes as well, is one thing that a lot of people don't understand. That it's not just one route that goes across the peninsula, but there's also a route that goes down by the coast. There's a route that comes down from Mount Koya, which I mentioned earlier. And there's a route that comes down from Ise Jingu as well. So a lot of different routes that kind of connect, making this whole region really, really significant in terms of spirituality and also that Japanese history as well. Some people will know about that. Your regular international tourists that come here, a lot of them will actually have searched it online. They'll search maybe top 10 places to visit in Japan. And the Kumano Kodo regularly comes up as number 1, 2, 3 in the top 5 on these lists. But yeah, I suppose it's kind of depends on the person, but those are probably the main reasons that people would come to hike the Kumano Kodo. Very good. Paul, have you done any of it yourself? I've done a lot of it. I've done the one across the Nakahechi route. I've done all of that. I've also done parts of the Ohechi, which is the one that goes around the coast. I've done a little bit of the Kohechi, which is a smaller route that goes up towards Mount Koya. But there are 2 other routes that I've not yet had the pleasure of walking. Those are the ones that go up to Ise, and then there's another one that's maybe not as walkable as the rest. It was actually esoteric Buddhist monks that used to walk it in the past for esoteric training. So it's very, very hard to hike. So I'll probably leave that one out, but the rest of them, hopefully I'll hike more. Great job. Great. So Kamitani Kacho was saying that I've walked more than her. So if anyone else on the call tonight has any questions, or if you have any thoughts on connections that could be built between Ireland and Wakayama, or any industries you want to hear more about, feel free to unmute yourself now or let us know afterwards. You can contact the IJCC and we can introduce you to Paul. And as Pat said earlier in his introduction about Tales from the Regions, these events are really trying to build longer term relationships between Irish business and the different regions in Japan. So it's great to hear about your region tonight, Paul, and you really seem to have become part of the community there. So if we don't have any more questions, it seems we're okay, then I'd like to hand over to Tsuchiya-san, President of the IJCC now, to say a few words. And after that, then we will have some breakout rooms for networking. So, Tsuchiya-san.
Good evening, dear IJCC members, friends of IJCC. Good evening and warm welcome to our 5th Tales from the Region Wakayama. My name is Yoshihiro Tsuchiya. I'm the chairman of IJCC. First of all, I'd like to sincerely thank Ms. Chitose Kametani-san, Section Manager, Tanabe City Board of Education, Life Long Learning Division, for your very nice remarks. And also Mr. Paul Finn, a coordinator of international relations, CIR at Tanabe City, Wakayama, for your very interesting and informative introduction of Wakayama and the Tanabe City. Thank you so much. I am very interested to find out that you were the intern of the Toyocoin, which is our most important sponsor, and I think we might met at the time when you were intern. I'm not sure, but because as you mentioned, you joined the St. Patrick's parade, and maybe you did come over to the I Love Island Festival, which held in Yoyogi Park at the same time, which IGCC held this event about the island. Anyway, one thing, if you allow me, speaking of my private a bit, I talked with Paul and the Kametani-san a while ago. My mother was born in Wakayama, in the city called Gobo City, which even Japanese people don't hear about this city at all, but which is very close to Tanabe City. And when I was a kid, every summer I visited Wakayama to see my grandpa and grandma. So Wakayama is one of my important family roots and very important place for me. I only have good memories about Wakayama, and very happy to be able to listen about Wakayama in these tales from the region. So thank you so much again, Paul and Kametani-san. Actually, I really recommend all of you to visit Wakayama, especially Kumano Kodo, including the Koya-san and also Nachi waterfall. Nachi waterfall, Nachi no Taki is very, very beautiful waterfall. I can really recommend it. It is one of the best waterfall in Japan. So it's worthwhile to visit there. And the Kumano Kodo, without doubt, it's a very spiritual place. And also I really recommend you to go. And also Shirahama is the very nice onsen, and also for the place to go to see the very beautiful white beach. And actually, when I first went to the in Ireland, go to Cliff of Mocha, suddenly there's a place called the Sandanpeki in the Shirahama. This reminds me actually Sandanpeki. It looks kind of similar, and also some part looks like a giant causeway in the Northern Ireland. So it's a kind of mixture of the reminds me of Sandanpeki in the Wakayama. So I recommend you to go there as well. Also, Wakayama reminds me a lot of nice food, as mentioned, mikan, the Japanese orange, all foods related to plum, umeboshi or umeshu. And also, I like to recommend the really nice fresh seafood. There are lots of nice seafood in Wakayama, so you can enjoy a really variety of seafoods in Wakayama. So maybe I can be the ambassador of Wakayama. Anyway, as you know, IGCC has been continuing these tales from the region online events, and tonight is the fifth one, following Kamaishi, Fukuroi, Nara, Matsue. And we would like to continue this series and reach the regional Irish people or community and strengthen the relation and network as much as we can. And meanwhile, the picture behind me is the picture of the World Cup game in Japan 2 years ago in Fukuroi City in Ekobo Stadium. And as you know, this weekend, we will have the Island Japan rugby game again on Saturday. So I think all of you look forward to watching this game, and I hope you're enjoying this game, exciting game as well. finally, I hope you enjoy the event tonight. And again, thank you very much for joining us. And I hope to see you in our next event. どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Tsuchiya-san. Just before we move on, we had one additional question come in. So Paul, are you ready to take one last question?
I am, yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, great. So the question we have here is, I've heard that Wakayama has lots of rain. When is the best season to visit?
Oh, very good one. I suppose what people might have heard about our typhoon season is particularly violent in compared to the rest of Japan. But in terms of if people are coming to hike the Kumano-Kodo, I'd recommend maybe spring or autumn. So in spring, the Yamazakura, or the sakura trees in the mountains, the wild sakura, they're not quite like the sakura you might see in Tokyo or in Osaka in the cities. They're quite a particular brand of sakura. They're blooming in spring, so that's a nice time to visit. And also in autumn, we have the changing of the color of the leaves. So especially up in Mount Koya, but also in certain areas along the Kumano-Kodo, it's particularly beautiful. I think just to peg onto that, I mentioned DMO a lot of times. That's Direct Management Organization. I think I could be wrong there, but it's where in Tanabe in particular, they've gotten a lot of the community groups that would have worked separately in promoting tourism, and they've brought them together, and it's more organized. So it's a fantastic way that they've found to work to like really focus on the same goal and promote tourism in this area. I think one of the guys had a quote in his book about the Kumano-Kodo that hiking the Kumano-Kodo is like copulating with the universe. So I just thought that was a fantastic quote as well. A little bit lewd, but yeah, I think that kind of shows how fantastic and how it can sometimes be life-changing for people to come and visit the Kumano-Kodo and hike the pilgrimage too.
Great stuff. Thank you, Paul.
No problem.
Thanks for your insight and for educating us all in Wakayama Prefecture.
Thank you.
And before we jump into the next one, I think we're just going to have a few words, a few updates from Pat on IJCC activities. Is that correct, Pat?
Yeah, perfect. I suppose I always use this opportunity to ask everybody, first of all, thank everybody for supporting the IJCC, but I suppose more importantly, to help promote the IJCC to others. It would be fantastic if you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and engage and like with our posts as well. What we found in the last 12 months, or actually since COVID-19, we've been fortunate that the IJCC community has grown its membership by about 25%, and that's not necessarily the norm across other chambers in Tokyo. And we've been kind of looking at why that was and is, and I think one of the important things that a lot of people have said to us during lockdown, people feel a bit isolated, so the IJCC community has been a good opportunity for people to network online, as well as people from Ireland have now joined the IJCC because they're interested in Japan, have been here previously, are planning to come here. And obviously the regional network now we're trying to build up is fantastic. So what I would really like everybody to do, if you can, is get more involved with the IJCC, attend the events, join up as a member if you can. And also then, if you know of anybody else in different regions who's willing to do a Tales from the Region or wants to get involved in our regional committee, then contact Emiko or Aisling or myself or Tsuchiya-san, and we'd love to have you as part of the community. And then final thing, I just want to, as usual, call out our key platinum sponsor, Toyoku. And actually, in our Tales from the Region series, I think this is the second time that one of the CIRs has mentioned that they did an internship with Toyoku. I think Katie in Nara had previously done as well. So I think Toyoku have really done a good job in helping bring Irish people to Japan, as well as supporting the IJCC for many years. So that's all from me tonight.
I think, so we're not going to have any more breakout rooms tonight. We had 2, but we're going to wrap it up there. So we're already a minute over time. Sorry about that now. But I just, again, thanks very much to Paul for joining us tonight and giving us the talk on Wakayama. It was really great. And yeah, so if any, I guess just for the Tales from the Region series, we're always looking for new speakers. So if anyone out there has any interest or is living in a region in Japan, we'd be delighted to talk to you about getting involved. And thanks again to everyone for participating tonight. We'll wrap it up there now. So hope you all enjoyed. And thank you again to Paul, your supervisor, Kametani-san, as well for joining us. And hope to see you all again soon. That's it for tonight. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much.
Very much. Have a good evening.